Alrighty guys, today I'll be showing you guys how to change out your rear brake pads on your ML63 AMG. This also applies to R63 owners as it is the same exact brake caliper setup, and I think most AMGs from this time use very similar sort of style. I got these Hella, Paget, or Paget, whatever you want to call them, brake pads from SP Euro, so I got the unlimited warranty. Also got this rear brake pad sensor, very important to get this as well. It is only on the passenger side of the 63s over here in the US, or the right side. As we can see, the sensor kind of comes along over here along this little bracket, then it attaches right back here. My pads are pretty low on this car, as you guys can kind of see there. It is getting close to showing the error on the display, or the warning rather. I'm going to road trip soon, so I figured it'd be a good time to change these out before that. The first thing I'm going to remove is the anti-rattle bracket for the caliper over here. It is a sliding caliper setup. Use a flathead screwdriver, just kind of try and pop it out like so. It will pop very violently, so I want to make sure you grab it like I just did. Alright, so once you remove the anti-rattle bracket, there is also a bracket for the brake pad wear sensor, which is right over here. You can kind of see this is the area, little plastic piece, and then below that is an E10 eTorx socket, or eTorx bolt to remove. I'm going to remove that real quick, just so there's no tension on the actual cable itself. To remove the actual sensor from this connector itself, there are two tabs. You got one on the top over here, one on the bottom, exact same sort of deal. If you lift them both those with a kind of a pick tool like this, for example, you can successfully remove that connector from this sort of bracket. Alrighty, so I've got that disconnected. We can now put this bracket aside. We're not going to worry about this until we have the new sensor to put in. Moving on to the rear of the caliper over here, we've got the brackets for the actual caliper. We have to take off these little dust caps. There's one on the bottom. There's also one on the top, kind of hard to see, but it is there. Remove those, and then we can remove the guide pins for the caliper itself. So the pins are 7mm Allens. Really good to have a ratchet so you can sort of Allen like this. They're a little bit sticky, so keep that in mind. Not the easiest to remove, but some silicone spray will help that out a lot. Alrighty, so now we are ready to take the caliper off the car itself, or at least the outer bracket, as it houses the pads itself. But the only issue we're going to have now is that the pads are a little bit compressed on the rotor itself, so they will be a little bit difficult to remove. So using a flathead screwdriver to kind of pry on the edges of the brake pad from the inside will kind of help us get some leverage to get the outer bracket off. Once you've got a decent amount of prying and prodding out of the way, the caliper bracket kind of comes off like so, and the pads will kind of pop out of the dust boots and the pistons, as you can see. So it is not good to put tension on the brake lines by keeping the caliper hanging like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some wire or some old coat hanger material and sort of attach it to the rear control arm and hold it up like that. Alrighty, so we got the old rear side over here, the passenger side, and we have this one that was kind of inward on the car, which had the brake pad wear sensor over here, which as you can see is kind of slowly wearing down. Didn't quite trigger the alarm yet, but getting there. These pads are basically done. I mean, there's really nothing much left here, so really good I'm doing this right now. But anyways, with the new pads, as you can see, the rear of the old pads, one had this sort of weird shape over here, this one had this shape, 2 prongs versus 3, so make sure you mimic that with the new pads. We got 3 prongs and 2 prongs. To mount your new wear sensor, just push in like that, just kind of slots right into the little groove in the brake pad itself. So before installing the new pads, it's a good time to clean up your entire sort of caliper surface, get all the brake dust out of there, and also I had some surface rust on the rotor itself over here where the wheel mounts. I clean all that up with some wire brush like this, and also a wire brush attachment on my drill. But yeah, as you can see, it is pretty clean now. Obviously not perfect, but it's going to get dirty again in like 2 seconds when the car starts driving. So not a huge deal. But now we can start greasing stuff up and start putting the brake pads back in. So with your new pads, you're going to want to put grease along the little ears over here, as long as the basically entire backside. Don't put too much, but just enough to kind of cover the entire surface, and also on these little clips as well. This is also not completely necessary if you put a good amount on the actual pads itself, but you can also put some brake caliper grease on the little points where the pads slide through. It is a little bit better if you do that, if you put a little bit, not too much. Also put a little bit on the piston itself, and you should be good to go and reassemble the caliper. I should also mention before doing this, you want to make sure your piston is pressed all the way in. It might take a little bit more effort than just pushing it in, because there is obviously brake fluid in there causing pressure. But if you don't do this part, you will not be able to get the caliper back on the rotor, as the new pads take up a lot more space. So another option, if you can't press down on the piston with it pushing down, you can also use the old brake pad, put it in there, and then also use a caliper tool like this, a brake pad tool like this, and kind of sandwich in there, and then you can just start twisting, and it'll compress the piston back into place. Now I believe my piston's in a good place right now, so I'm going to try it out. If not, we'll use that tool, and we should be good to go. But I'll let you guys know if anything else happens. Alrighty, so with the pads all greased up on the back sides and reinstalled in the caliper, you can now reinstall the caliper guide pins right down there. You're going to want to grease those up really nice and good on the sides before you put those in as well. And then once those are in, you can torque those down to 18 foot-pounds. Just want to throw out there, if you have some brake cleanup, it'd be a great time to clean off some stuff, all the brake dust on the caliper and even some excess grease that's kind of built up as you install them. The grease will kind of get everywhere because it's just how brake installs go. So yeah, just keep that in mind and try and keep it as clean as possible. But no worries, it'll all eventually come off as you drive the car. It's not really a huge deal. Take a better look at the kind of greased up brake pin. And once you've got the caliper pins all greased up and put back in, torqued to 18 foot-pounds, you can go put the caps back on those, little plastic caps to prevent any dust from getting in there. Then go ahead and reconnect the brake pad wear sensor and put that bracket back on with the E10 eTorx bolt. Put the anti-rattle clip back on just by prying it in place, using a flathead if you need to for some help. And then that is basically it for installation. Before you drive the car, press the brake pedal a few times to kind of get the pads all meeting up with the rotor surface. And then before you actually seriously drive the car, you should do some bedding, which will be on the back of the box for your brake pads. So of course these brake pads have no instructions on the bedding process, but essentially what you want to do is when the car is back up and running, you want to do some very harsh stops based from 50 miles per hour. But you want to start everything from like 40 miles per hour, hard on the brakes, do it a couple times, then increase that to 30 miles per hour, then 40 miles per hour, then 50 miles per hour, and then you're essentially going to have like these brakes cooking. They'll be super hot, but that allows you to get the layer of brake pad on the rotor itself to create that sort of combination of the brake pad and rotor which you want to stop the car. It's probably a better way of describing that, but that's kind of the way I've kind of learned it. But yeah, once you've got that process all completed, the car is good to go and you are all set. One more thing to note is that your brake fluid level will now be incorrect as you've pushed the pistons back, and this will cause more fluid to go in the reservoir, so it may require you to remove some fluid. So in my case, the fluid level is a little bit higher, but not too high, but I will probably have to take some out when I do the other side of the car. This engine bay is mad dirty. I'm going to clean this when we get back from our trip.